You think you know the old 30-06? You probably think it's just a dusty relic that your grandpa used to hunt deer in flannel. Wrong. This is not just a hunting round. It's a war criminal, a legal nightmare, and a sniper legend disguised as a sporting cartridge. Most shooters treat it like a boring standard, but today we're digging into the classified files to reveal 10 facts that the history books conveniently forgot to mention. Rank number 1 proves why this 100-year-old veteran still embarrasses modern ballistics. To kick this list off, we have to jump into a time machine and look at the mistake that started it all. Most hunters carry a 30-06 into the woods, thinking it was a stroke of American genius born in 1906. Here's the reality check. The legend actually started 3 years earlier as a total failure called the .3003. Back in 1903, the Army tried to pair their new Springfield rifle with a heavy 220-grain round-nosed bullet. It was a disaster. The heavy bullet plowed through the air with the trajectory of a thrown brick, and the powder burned so hot it melted barrels faster than you can ruin a cheap suppressor. It was useless for the long-range hunting precision we demand today. They had to scrap the design, shorten the case neck by a fraction of an inch, and switch to a lighter 150-grain Spitzer pointed bullet to fix the ballistics. So technically, the most famous American hunting cartridge is just a patched-up version of a bad first draft. The downside is that if you ever stumble across an original 1903 rifle in a pawn shop, do not shoot modern ammo through it. The chamber dimensions are slightly different, and the pressure spike could turn that piece of history into a hand grenade. It's a rugged lesson that even legends have a messy past. Moving from domestic failures to international theft, let's talk about the dirty little secret behind this cartridge's design. If you ask the average deer hunter at the lodge, he will tell you the 30-06 is as American as apple pie and bald eagles. Here is the inconvenient truth. The entire architecture of the 30-06 Springfield was heavily borrowed from the German Mauser system. After American troops got pinned down by superior 7mm Spanish Mausers in Cuba during 1898, the U.S. Ordnance Department realized their old rimmed cartridges were obsolete. So they essentially copied the Mauser's rimless case design and the stripper clip loading system. It was such a blatant copy that the U.S. government actually got sued for patent infringement by Mauser. Believe it or not, Uncle Sam had to pay out over $200,000 in royalties to Germany, even while we were fighting them in World War I. But here is why this matters for you in the deer stand. Because it copied that German rimless design, the 30-06 is one of the smoothest feeding cartridges in history. Unlike the rimmed 30-30, which can snag in a magazine, the 30-06 stacks perfectly and feeds into the chamber like water flowing through a pipe. The flaw is simply pride. You are not shooting a purely American invention. You are shooting a German design with an American accent. So the next time your rifle cycles effortlessly under stress, you can thank the German engineers who sued us for the privilege. Speaking of design perfection, the architecture of this casing is so robust that gunsmiths just could not leave it alone. If you look at the ammo shelf in any hardware store in America, you are looking at the children of the 30-06. Here's the deal. The brass casing of the 30-06 is the most modified platform in ballistic history. Wildcatters, those guys in their basements obsessed with speed,
realized early on that if you take this case and squeeze the neck down to .277 inches, you get the legendary .270 Winchester. That's right, the round that Jack O'Connor used to hunt sheep all over the world is just a .30-06 wearing a corset. Neck it down even further to .257 and you get the 2506 Remington, a speed demon that turns varmints into red mist. Neck it up to .35 and you create the 35 Wheeling, a heavy hitter that hits like a freight train on elk and moose without the punishing recoil of a Magnum. The problem? Sometimes the kids actually beat the father. For pure flat shooting trajectory on open plains, the .270 Winchester is ballistically superior to the original .30-06. And for brush busting, the 35 Wheeling delivers more kinetic energy transfer. So while the .30-06 is the jack of all trades, the reality is that its own offspring are often the masters of specific hunts. But make no mistake, without this parent case, modern hunting culture would look completely different.
While the offspring are impressive, there is one specific area where the old man still dominates the younger generation. Stop listening to the internet forums that claim the .30-06 and the .308 are ballistically identical. That is a myth. While they perform similarly with standard 150-grain deer loads, the .30-06 has a secret superpower hidden in its longer case length. It has the boiler room capacity to push heavy 220-grain bullets effectively. Here's the physics. If you try to stuff a long, heavy bullet into a short .308 case, the bullet seats too deep and eats up valuable powder space, killing your velocity. But the .30-06 has the extra engine room to seat those heavy projectiles without sacrificing powder volume. This means when you're hunting dangerous game like coastal brown bears or heavy moose in the thick timber, the .30-06 can deliver deep, bone-crushing penetration that modern short-action cartridges simply cannot match. It hits with a thud that you can feel in your chest. The trade-off is the action length. To get this performance, you're stuck carrying a long-action rifle, which is physically longer, slightly heavier, and requires a longer bolt throw to cycle than the snappy short-action rifles everyone loves today. But when a 1,000-pound grizzly is charging through the brush, you won't care about the extra half-inch of bolt travel. You'll just be glad you brought the heavy artillery. Now we're flipping the script completely, stepping away from the heavy hitters to look at the fastest .30-06 ever mass-produced. Back in the 1970s, Remington decided to try something crazy. They wanted to turn your dad's old deer rifle into a high-speed coyote destroyer without changing the barrel. They called it the Accelerator. Here's how it worked. Instead of a standard .30 caliber bullet, they loaded a tiny 55-grain .224 caliber projectile inside a plastic sleeve called a sabot. When you pulled the trigger, that plastic shoe gripped the rifling to seal the gas, but as soon as it left the muzzle, the plastic fell away, sending that tiny bullet screaming down range at over 4,000 feet per second. That is nearly twice the speed of a standard load. It turned the .30-06 into a flat-shooting laser beam that could vaporize varmints instantly. But here's the deal breaker that killed it. Most .30-06 barrels have a twist rate of 1 in 10, which is designed to stabilize heavy bullets, not hypervelocity needles. The accuracy was often terrible. We're talking about groups that looked more like shotgun patterns at 200 yards. Worse yet, that plastic sabot would often melt inside the barrel, leaving behind a gooey plastic fouling in your rifling that was a nightmare to scrub out. It was a brilliant concept on paper, but in reality, it was a messy experiment that proved you can't cheat the laws of physics. Stepping up the game to the battlefield, we have to talk about a fatal flaw that threatens the most iconic rifle ever built, If you own an authentic M1 Garand, listen closely because I might be about to save you $1,000 in repairs. Just because it says 30-06 on the box does not mean you can feed it into your Garand. Here's the technical breakdown. The original M1 Garand was designed specifically for military M2 ball ammunition, which uses a very specific fast-burning powder. Modern commercial hunting ammo, the stuff you buy at big box stores, is loaded with slow-burning powders to maximize velocity for long-range shots. When you fire that modern stuff in an old Garand, the pressure at the gas port near the muzzle is way too high. It hits the operating rod with so much violent force that it can actually bend the steel rod like a cheap coat hanger. We call this bending the op rod, and it turns a piece of functioning history into a heavy paperweight in a split second. The action slams back with a mechanical scream that tells you something just went wrong. To run modern ammo safely, you actually have to buy an aftermarket adjustable gas plug to vent that excess pressure. It's a massive annoyance that you cannot just grab a box of ammo off the shelf and go shooting with the rifle that won World War II. But while this historical quirk is annoying, it is nothing compared to the controversial secret we are revealing at rank number 1, a secret that changes how you see ballistics forever.
Now we're getting serious, leaving the civilian hunting grounds to talk about the most lethal environment on Earth. Before the military fell in love with the .308, the 30-06 was the caliber that defined American sniping. And no one proved this better than the legend himself, Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock in Vietnam. While everyone else was transitioning to newer platforms, White Feather racked up 93 confirmed kills, and he did most of his legendary work behind a Winchester Model 70 chambered in 30-06. Here's the mechanics of why it worked. He used standard M72 match ammo, a 173-grain boat-tail bullet that was incredibly stable in the thick, humid air of the jungle. That heavy projectile could punch through foliage that would deflect lighter modern bullets like a bin ball. It struck with the authority of a sledgehammer, dropping targets instantly at ranges where other rounds simply ran out of steam. But here's the reality check I want to hear from you about. The old wood stocks on those rifles would swell up in the humidity, shifting the point of impact and forcing snipers to constantly re-zero their scopes. It was a maintenance nightmare that required constant babysitting. So here's my question for you keyboard warriors. If you were dropped into a survival situation today, would you trust the raw power of the old school 30-06, or would you take the lighter, easier to carry .308? I want to see a fight in the comments section below. Let me know which team you're on. Because despite the swelling stocks and the heavy recoil, the 30-06 proved that when the shot counts, kinetic energy is the only language that matters.
We're entering the elite tier now. And to understand this next rank, you have to realize that this cartridge was never just about accuracy. Most hunters think the 30-06 is a deer cartridge that got drafted into the military. That is completely backward. The truth is that this round was engineered from the ground up to be a machine gun cartridge first and a rifle cartridge second. When John Browning and the Army engineers were designing it, they needed a round with enough violent case pressure to cycle the heavy bolts of automatic weapons like the M1919 Browning and the legendary BAR. It had to run wet, run dirty, and extract reliably even when the gun was red hot. That is why the case has that specific taper, to ensure extraction never fails even when the chamber is filthy with carbon. But here's the price you pay for that reliability. Because it was built to cycle a 30-pound machine gun, it is absolutely punishing when you fire it out of a 7-pound hunting rifle. The recoil impulse is sharp, heavy, and unforgiving. It hits your shoulder like a sledgehammer wrapped in a thin towel, waking you up faster than a double shot of espresso.
While modern rounds like the 6.5 Creedmoor are designed for shooter comfort, the 30-06 was designed for war machines. It does not care about your bruised shoulder. It only cares about cycling the next round. But as powerful as this machine gun heritage is, it is nothing compared to the absolute ballistic dominance of the round sitting at number 1, a round that changed the map of North America.
This next one nearly took the number 1 spot because it is the single reason why our grandfathers never felt the need to buy a second rifle. If you could only own one rifle to survive the apocalypse in North America, logic dictates it has to be the 30-06. Here's the ballistics data that proves it. No other cartridge on the market handles such a massive spectrum of bullet weights with a standard factory barrel twist rate of 1 in 10. You can hand-load a featherweight 110-grain bullet to scream out of the muzzle at 3,400 feet per second to vaporize coyotes. Then, with the exact same rifle, you can switch to a massive 220-grain round-nosed solid to punch through the shoulder of a moose. It is a ballistic chameleon. It transforms from a varmint laser into a heavy game sledgehammer just by changing the ammunition. This versatility is why it refuses to die. But here's the deal breaker that drives the precision shooters crazy. Because it tries to do everything, it's a master of nothing. It's overkill for deer, destroying way more meat than a .243. It's inefficient for varmints compared to a .223, and it kicks harder than a 6.5 Creedmoor for target shooting. It's the ultimate jack of all trades, but that means you have to accept that there's always a specialized tool that could do the specific job slightly better. But if you're on a budget and can only afford one tool, this is the Swiss Army knife that will never let you down.
We have finally arrived at the summit, and the number 1 fact is simply the reason why this cartridge refuses to die. The ultimate secret of the 30-06 is that it is the gold standard by which every other cartridge on the planet is judged. For over 100 years, it has successfully taken every single species of big game on the North American continent legally and reliably. From the smallest white-tailed deer in the thick woods of Alabama to the massive polar bears of the Arctic Circle, the 30-06 has done it all. It generates nearly 3,000 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. That is the magic number. It represents the perfect ballistic balance, offering the maximum amount of terminal energy a human being can control without developing a flinch. Every time a gun company invents a new wonder cartridge, look at their marketing. They always compare it to the 30-06. They are chasing the ghost of this legend. The only flaw at this level is that it is undeniably boring. Pulling a 30-06 out of your truck is like driving a beige sedan to a car show. It is not sexy. It is not tactical. It will not get you likes on social media from the guys shooting expensive 6.5 Magnums. But when you are freezing in a tree stand and the trophy of a lifetime steps out at 300 yards, you do not want sexy. You want a dead animal. And that is exactly what the King delivers.
The history books might call it a relic, but the meat in the freezer tells a different story. Whether it's bending operating rods in a Garand or dropping elk in the Rockies, the 30-06 has earned its stripes in blood and brass. Stop chasing the hype trains and learn to master the tools that actually work. If you learned something new about this old warhorse, or if you think I missed a critical fact, sound off in the comments below. Train hard, stay safe, and I will see you downrange.